Dr. Lisa Oberlander is a native Virginian who earned her bachelor's degree in music education from Indiana University in Bloomington. Her master's and doctoral degrees are in music performance from Arizona State University, and she arrived at CSU in 1998. In the beginning of our conversation, Lisa and I revisit her recent unorthodox performance of Led Zeppelin in Legacy Hall. So, last Friday night, you played an arrangement of Led Zeppelin's Black Dog with the CSU Wind Ensemble.
Yes.
Can I just say, you literally blew away the audience. It was incredible. It was amazing.
Well, thank you. That's what that piece is designed to do. You're doing something wrong if you don't have people on their feet at the end of it, because it's so over the top, ridiculous, dramatic rock and roll for clarinet and band, which you don't normally think of as a rock and roll instrument.
No. Well, the clarinet's the electric guitar, right?
Right.
And I've never heard a clarinet do things quite like that.
There are no other pieces like that.
Yeah.
This is really, the same composer has written a couple pieces that are similar, but this one is by far the most, higher, faster, louder, and a lot of those guitar kind of sliding around techniques. And
it was crazy, really wild fun stuff. I loved it. It was great. It was a great program on the whole. Really.
That concert's always really, all the concerts are great, but that's the one that goes with the conductor's workshop that we do every year.
Oh, right.
And because of the conductor's workshop, the music is chosen specifically to be like the very best of sort of the old standard pieces and the very best of the new stuff, and the sort of like an all-star program, because all the people for the workshop are in the audience. So it's also a way to show off what we do really well.
Oh, I guess I missed that about the composition of the audience. That's cool.
If you just come to the concert, you wouldn't know. But,
no, I didn't know.
There's about probably 20 participants, and then I think unlimited number of auditors, and their first session is right after that concert. So the guest conductors and our conductor, Jamie Nix, are the clinicians. So the people come to the concert, hopefully they're blown away by our students, and then they start work right after the concert. And so it's really a big chance for us to show off.
Yeah, it was really fun as just an outsider to come and sit and hear it all. But it made me think about how your role as a teacher and a mentor might shape what you choose to do as an artist. I mean, how do you think it affects you to be, wearing the role of head of the clarinet studio when you're performing?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I want to play well because I want them to respect me when I'm teaching. And it'd be hard to do that if I got up there and didn't sound very good. My best experiences as a student were going to my teacher's concerts, and you can't wait to go practice afterwards. You're so inspired, and you want to play the same pieces they play, and you want to sound just like that. And it actually does make your students better, so that's a big part of it. Also, it would just be embarrassing in front of your own students. And I not that I'm perfect, because I'm certainly not, but it's embarrassing to make mistakes when you're in your office all day long saying, don't do this and don't do that. And, you've got to live it. But I do make a real effort to play all kinds of music because I want to show them that I think it's important to play all kinds of music. So I try not to, even though I really prefer some pieces maybe more than others, I try to do a wide spectrum of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I also say yes to everything. If a conductor asks me to play, I say yes. And if I don't know the piece, I go learn it. And, because I want to play as much as I can for them. Yeah.
Well, it's clear that you've cultivated a following because, there was great anticipation I could feel for this piece when you came out.
Oh, good. Well, the piece, like I said, the piece is really a one in a million. And it's a kind of of a venue that we, as clarinet players, we tend to be pretty, you know, we sit back in the orchestra and we play nice solos, and we play really good solo pieces with piano, but we don't have that thing that like percussionists have where they come out and it's like, you know, everybody on their feet. So
so you grabbed that moment when you
absolutely,
find it. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm so thankful that Jamie asked me to do it.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure, but you know, we had the Cut Bait Music Festival here in May.
Oh yeah.
And Schwob did a concert as a part of that. So we were talking about, well, what would be appropriate for this pop sort of, you know, blues, rock and roll, popular folk festival. So we did sort of a 1-hour concert of maybe music you wouldn't normally hear on a concert program. And so I decided to play Black Dog with piano. So I actually learned it in May. And it wasn't that much pressure, it wasn't that many people, it wasn't a ton of music students, but what it did is it gave me a chance to learn it. So then when he asked me to play it a few months later, I said, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned how inspiring it was to attend concerts of your professors. What were you like as a college student at IU in Bloomington?
Yeah.
You were a music ed major.
I was music ed for my undergrad, and I was your typical music ed major. I was really excited about doing well all the time. Not that I did well all the time, but I was excited about it, and I was really, maybe it's just my nature, I was really sort of determined to be good at everything, even though I wasn't, but I really cared, which is probably, somebody told me once, most college professors are type A personalities, and most college students are not, which is why there's often such a clash between the two.
Yeah.
But I think I was probably, you know, a typical dorky band kid also. You know?
But you had different goals in mind than when you finished and when you went off to Arizona.
I love working with kids. I could have been a high school band director easily. And I still love going out to high schools and working with kids. And there's a certain, I'm not better than other people, but there's certain personalities who are just like a room full of kids is a problem, whereas one student is easy.
Yeah.
And sort of the management of it all. It's sort of like the discipline issue. And sometimes it actually is a discipline issue, but I could have done that. But when I graduated, I just felt like maybe I could still do that, but maybe I should go on and see in terms of performing what else was out there. Yeah. And as soon as I got to graduate school, I looked at my teacher and I thought, I want that job exactly. I want to teach, you know, interesting people and different people all day long, and I also want to play.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. I mean, I think that was my experience too. I kind of had to make the decision to try grad school before I was sure that I knew I really wanted to do it.
Yeah. I didn't actually think about teaching college ever until I was in graduate school, and probably not even at first. I don't know what I thought I was going to do, to be totally honest. I didn't see myself, you know, people who are determined to win an orchestra job. It's like I'd rather have a day job as a whatever and keep taking auditions until I win an orchestra job, and I never had that feeling. So I don't know what I thought. I think I just was was dumb enough to not really know and not really care, and to have parents who were just like, okay, good luck with that, who didn't like say, what are you doing?
Yeah. I think there are very few people who found their way straight into particularly being in academia. It's just not, I can't imagine, but, you know, people don't enjoy dressing up as us for Halloween, and, you know, we're not a big sort of kids' fantasy dream.
No lead characters in any big television shows that are popular. Yeah.
Unless they're like, you know, the sort of scary character who's socially awkward and... Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get off on that tangent. So as an undergrad, though, you went through a program that's not completely unlike ours in that you took general ed classes. Right. As a music major. So is there some value in that for students, do you think?
Oh, definitely. Yeah? Definitely. We have a lot here in Georgia, way more than most. My students here definitely take more non-music classes than I took at Indiana. But you know, no matter what you end up doing, whether you actually win an orchestra job or whether you're teaching private students or whether you're teaching college, you need to be able to deal with the writing aspect of life and having some general knowledge so you can speak to people. And I actually use non-music analogies all the time in my teaching, and as I'm sure all of us do. And it's hard when you don't know anything at all about any kind of science or any kind of history or things like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important. How much you need, that's a big topic.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is a right answer.
Right. And I know, I mean, that's of some controversy within our school because some faculty members might prefer there be less. Yeah. We've got a lot. In this next part of our conversation, Lisa and I talk about the importance of fairness in dealing with students.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that raises another set of questions, slightly tricky questions, having to do with the situation of the School of Music, its perceptions by other members of the faculty. I mean, it's much admired and also possibly envied by other faculty members. And so, I mean, one thing that's just really difficult to compare is this issue of load, your teaching load. Studio teaching is just such a completely different animal than classroom teaching. What does a typical day of teaching feel like to you? I mean, when you have to see one after the other, your students, and I mean, can you kind of describe what that sort of schedule feels like?
Sure. In a typical day, in a typical semester, I would have about 18 clarinet majors. So they schedule all their classes, and then I schedule their lessons around their classes so that they have time to warm up beforehand. So I sit down and put all their schedules out and work the big puzzle every semester. So in a typical day, I might have five-ish students, sometimes 4, sometimes 6. So each student gets an hour lesson every week alone with me. And then, so on a Friday, for example, I might have 4 students. And then on Fridays, we also have studio class, which is all of the clarinet players together and me for an hour. And we use that as a time for students to play for each other. And then I do teaching in front of the class. We also have guest artists come and do master classes then, or I'll get up and talk about a certain piece or a certain technique or something that the whole class can do together. So it's, how it is after you're done teaching a class where you're really engaged in trying to make things happen. It's exhausting. So on days when I have 5 or maybe 6 students, I try not to do more than about 3 in a row because I'm not worth a whole lot. Although it's amazing when you're tired and then another student comes in and they're doing really well. It's amazing how you forget how tired you are. You don't notice it till the end.
Yeah.
So a typical day would be about 5 students, a little bit of time for lunch, and then the endless emails and scheduling things, which, there are a lot of extra things that go on. Students are doing recording sessions to go to grad school. So you're helping them with those. Or they need help on a certain piece in an ensemble rehearsal that's about to start, and can I stop by and, or can I ask you about this fingering? And so there are all these things that happen that aren't really scheduled. And I tell the students, as long as I'm not teaching another student, unless it's an emergency, you can knock on the door if I'm practicing or whatever. If it's an emergency, come on in.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of students every day, even the ones who aren't having their lessons.
Yeah, yeah. And when they come for their one-on-one time, do you have like a plan for, what particular things each person is supposed to be focusing on for that semester, or like do you chart? I mean,
it's actually a week by week. It's an overall, but then there's a week by week assignment where I write as they threw out their lesson in a notebook, and then I give it to them. And that way there's never any misunderstanding about, I thought you didn't write down number 18, but I said number 18. There's none of that stuff.
Right.
And if I forget to write it down, I tell them they don't have to do it. Nobody's ever taken advantage of me.
Yeah.
They wouldn't dare. But I believe in, the only way I'm going to have any credibility is if I'm really, really fair.
Yeah.
And that's going to keep them motivated to do well. So basically I take each kid when they come in, and start with the same fundamentals and require the same things of them, and some of them get it right away, and some of them it takes a long time. So everybody moves sort of at their own speed.
Right.
So it's kind of like 18 different lesson plans.
Yeah.
But it's the same concepts.
Right.
So the tricky part for me is figuring out, you know, I tell them, as long as you're working to your very best potential, you're not going to have a problem with grades with me.
Right. Right.
So it's knowing when the problem is knowing if they're really working to the potential.
Right.
Because most people will say, yes, I practice this a lot. And I will say, well, it has to sound like you practiced it a lot, and it doesn't. So, you know, or it does, I can tell.
Right.
You know, and I feel like with experience, I've gotten better at saying, like, I don't care what you tell me. Yeah. This is not good enough because of A, B, and C. Or, yes, I can hear all the work that you did, and we're not there yet.
Unfortunate that you spent 20 hours practicing that, because...
Right. If that's true, which I'll leave that part out.
Right.
But actually, most of my students I know them pretty well by the time they come, because I spend a lot of time trying to get them to come here, and I know their parents. And so usually, if I say, well, did you really spend a lot of time on this? Usually they'll just confess right away. So it's not, I don't really have a problem with that.
In this next part of our conversation, Lisa and I talk about the challenges of studio teaching and why music students embrace the opportunity to learn even without grades attached. You know, I thought it was so fascinating to discover at one point in talking with my own dad about the way that he learned writing in college was one-on-one.
Really?
Yeah. He said they'd bring their writing professor some assignment from another class that they were given. And it was like a tutorial once a week, and you'd bring what you were working on.
I wish everybody could teach and learn that way.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, it can be hard because there's not just the content, like, you know, move this finger here or use more air here. There's also all the personal stuff that goes along with being one-on-one, and you kind of each learn together how you're going to be. And it's completely different with every person. So it's, I feel like you have to sort of be, you know, you have to be like the psychologist and the mom and the priest and like everything all wrapped up in one. Yeah. Even though you don't want to get involved in stuff that's not your business, but.
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility though. And then of course you've got to shift gears and work on your own stuff then.
Well, that's the part. So with the 5 students and the committee meeting and the emails, and then if I don't practice 2 hours a day, like I had this huge concert on Friday. I haven't played a note since Friday night. The last note of the piece you heard is the last time I touched my instrument.
And that's really unusual.
That's really unusual, but you know, it's my last concert of the semester, and so I took the weekend off. I said, you know what?
You gave yourself a weekend off.
Well, from playing the clarinet. No, just from playing.
Well, right.
Right. But I'm going to, you know, when I pick it up to practice tonight, I'm going to be like, oh, this feels terrible. So, and it's just like a muscle thing. It's not anything else. It's not something you can take time off from and not feel any result from. So it's like a never ending, there's always guilt if you don't practice. So it's like becomes psychological too.
Yeah.
But it also comes an extra 2 hours of work that if I don't do every day, I can't really do what I'm supposed to do.
Right, right. Well, I want to come back to this issue of just that you just mentioned of who you need to be in that room with any individual student. But I wonder, given that you've made yourself so available to, like, you know, just let me know if you need something, blah, blah, blah. When the students in particular have their own performances to do, I can imagine there are some crises. Can you tell any crisis stories with that?
Sure. I had a student who was about to play a recital in Legacy Hall, and we couldn't get the lights to come on. There's like a little light booth, and you go up there and you push a button and the lights come on. So I pushed the button, nothing. It's like, and this is Legacy Hall on like a Saturday afternoon. And Legacy Hall, you know, is jointly run by River Center Incorporated and the Schroeb School of Music, but we don't have like a tech staff Really. So we were frantically, Ryan's like, what are we going to do this by candlelight or something? But eventually we got them to come on.
That could have been, you know, atmospheric.
It could have been a total disaster. And, you know, his parents had come all the way from Tennessee, and it was just, somehow we got them back on. But also there are a lot of repair crises. I'm not an instrument repair person, and I should not be. And musicians who know a little bit about repair are often far more dangerous than people who just say, look, I don't know what I'm doing. But I've run upstairs to my office to get my own instrument to give to students to play, which at the moment, there's nothing else you can do. But, you know, that's like a $4,000 piece of equipment that I'm going to... And what happens if something happens to it? Am I really going to hold the student responsible? Nothing like that has ever happened. So, but I've also had like a pad fall out, and it's like you reach in your wallet, what do I have? Oh, I'll fix it with a Band-Aid, or I'll fix it with a postage stamp. I've done both of those.
Wow.
Or, you know, you just say to some other student, give me your clarinet, and you just take that instrument and you give it to this other kid. You just, in the moment, you do really whatever it takes. And that's the part of the job nobody else can do here. So I have to do it. Yeah. And we don't have a repair. We actually had a repair person in town, a trained guy who'd been to repair school, and he retired.
And that was it in Columbus?
There's a guy at Everything Musical who does some repair. But, you know, at 7 o'clock at night on a whatever, I'm it, me and my screwdriver.
Wow.
So it's a big responsibility. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it's terrifying sometimes.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, given that you've spent a lot of time, you know, recruiting younger kids to come and study with you, and then you're sort of nurturing them through this difficult passage of young adulthood, and, you know, as it's clear just from hearing about your typical weekly schedule, you've just got so much responsibility. How have you managed to avoid getting really burned out? I mean, what do you do to kind of take care of yourself so you can keep giving all this energy to other people?
You know, that's a good question. Every once in a while when I'm listening to the same movement of a piece that I've now been teaching for 15 years, every once in a while I think, I'd really be happy never to hear this again. Really, it's nice and all, but it's just too much, and the students make the same mistakes in the same places, and I hear myself saying for the 89th time, like, no, that's a B flat. But it's because the kids are all different. So the job isn't really the same. It's like, this guy has this strength and this weakness, and this girl has this really cool thing that's really easy for her, but she needs help with this. So it's not really the same job, even though in that moment, sometimes it's just the same piece and the same mistake.
Yeah.
So I think it's really the people involved. It's not the music necessarily. And, you know, if I do my job right, they're really successful when they play. When they play their jury at the end of the semester, or when they play their recital, or I've had some kids win the concerto competition and they're up there playing a concerto with the orchestra. It's like, you know, all the heartache and all the, like, I'm so nervous when they're performing. I'm so like, oh my heart is pounding, and I'd rather be playing myself than watching them perform. But when they had that triumphant moment, it's really great. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, I one of the things that keeps me going through sitting at graduation every year, which, you know, as faculty members, I think it generally consider a pretty onerous burden, but is just that moment that you're describing of those faces. And getting to see truly, you know, someone at one of the peak experiences of their life when they're being recognized for a long dedication to a long-term project, and they've succeeded.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think our students generally look really great at graduation. It's like, wow, look at that person. They've really spiffed up. Right. They look terrific. They're happy.
I remember when he was.
Yes. Yeah. So it is really satisfying.
It also helps that no day is the same for me. Mm-hmm. So I never, you know, I have the same schedule every week. But, you know, from a Monday to a Tuesday, I might have 5 students on a Monday and 4 students on a Tuesday. And if I go to like do a recruiting trip or something, I move them all. So I teach them all like 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And that's, even though that's exhausting, it's always has that kind of like, hey, we're doing something crazy here, and we're all in it together. So it doesn't ever feel like just like the grind of doing it one more time. Unless there's a student who's really not practicing, that is like the most miserable. Then it becomes a real conversation about, you know, why you chose to do this, and why would you choose to do this and then not really do it. And then that can be, there's a lot of dread in those kind of lessons. Yeah. Those people don't last very long, but while they're here, it can be pretty dreadful.
Yeah, I often wish that I could say to the person who's habitually late for class, for example, because I used to view that as just sort of a, you know, typical time management issue.
Right.
But as I've kind of watched myself deal with different situations and sometimes been chronically late to things, I recognized it's because I don't really want to do that thing that I show up late to it. And I often want to say to students, so clearly you are not really invested in what we're doing here, because if you were looking forward to it, you wouldn't be late.
The one time your car broke down or something, that's different.
Well, right. No, I mean like this is clearly a signal. Yeah. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah. It happens sometimes. You get somebody who is a music major because maybe they were good at it in high school. Oh, yeah. And they really liked it. But once they get to college and they realize all the things and all the like daily, it can be kind of tedious sometimes, the work that goes with it. They just kind of are late, or they get sick a lot. Most people get sick, they miss a lesson or two. But, you know, by the time they're calling in sick the third or fourth time, it's like, okay, you either need to take care of yourself and like withdraw from this course and figure out what's going on, or maybe you need to find something else to do. Yeah,
yeah. That's a tough conversation to have.
And, you know, their parents are often really invested in them being music majors, and they spend a lot of money on equipment and music and reads, and it can be hard for them to admit that maybe it's not really what they, but like you said, it's pretty obvious from the little things.
Right, right.
But we try to counsel them into doing something, finding what they really want to do, and doing that instead.
Yeah, right. Which then maybe, you know, would be a big relief.
Sure.
When they feel like,
oh, it's better for everybody.
Yeah. Well, so back to this idea of, being a priest, a counselor, a mom, whoever in that particular moment. I've been thinking recently about this kind of concept of bringing your whole self to work, that it's important to feel like you are acceptable as your whole self in your workplace, and you're not a sharply divided, person from your professional life. And I really like that idea. On the other hand, I recognize that it's easier for me to embrace that now that I've gotten the stamp of approval, right? I'm through tenure. I don't have a reason to feel insecure that my whole self is not okay in this environment,
Yeah.
But the other thing and so I don't know that I would have felt quite as safe to just be me, who I am, the first few years.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think is tricky about it is that then you have to be pretty vigilant and introspective about who this whole self is that you're bringing to school, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
There's some flaws there, and I have to be willing to be a human being in front of my students and let them see the not so together parts. But I don't know. I guess I can imagine that teaching in the studio setting, calls for a certain sort of vulnerability,
Definitely.
I mean,
I when I pull out my clarinet to demonstrate something for a student, and if their reed is better than mine, I have to say, okay, don't listen to my reed, but listen, or I'll have to try to demonstrate something for them that they've been working on a long time that I haven't played in 5 or 10 years. And I'll say, okay, ignore the wrong notes, but make it sound like this.
Yeah.
And you do have to be pretty secure to like be able to do that and think like, okay, the student's not suddenly thinking I'm a loser because I'm, playing a bunch of wrong notes or whatever.
Which maybe what helps with that is that you never really set yourself up as, I am the authority who you will never challenge, and.
Well, everybody has everybody's personality, right? When you're teaching is a little different.
Yeah.
Maybe than your regular, like you were saying, maybe different than your regular personality.
Yeah.
But my approach has always been to just be so fair and normal that when I need to come down on somebody, I can really do it.
Yeah.
Not to yell and scream at them, but if I can look at them and say, this is unacceptable. If I have been up to that point, willing to give them praise when it's deserved, and willing to be really organized so that they know exactly what I expect, so that they're likely to do better when they know exactly what I expect, then I feel like I kind of can do anything I need to do as long as I set that up first. So, everybody interacts with their students a little differently at every school, everywhere. Yeah. It probably has no studio teaching or not.
Right.
I kind of feel like if you have favorites amongst your students, they shouldn't know, and that's a mistake that I see people make sometimes, and this can be really a morale issue. Or, and you should really like all your students, even the ones that you don't really like. I think we tend to like the students who are more like us when we were that age. And one of my teachers in Indiana used to say, you have to find something to like, even if it's just the color of their shoelaces. Like, it has to be something so that you can legitimately look them in the eye and talk to them like a human being, even if even if you wouldn't choose to spend time with that person.
Right.
But
compassion.
Really. Right. And you're friendly as to whether you're really friends.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids, all of them, I would love to be friends with down the road, but how friendly can you be when you're giving grades? And yet what we're doing is so personal together.
It's very complicated. Yeah. But, for me, that's one of the things that keeps me also from feeling burned out, too, is just that, this is clearly a life's work.
Yeah.
So it's never, I'm never done learning new things. But I think it was a huge transition for me also early on to remind myself before every class, this is not about you. To focus on the person and their shoelaces. Yeah. And you're better and it's easier.
Yeah.
When you're there and you're thinking, okay, let's just lose the self-consciousness about whether anyone perceives that I know what I'm talking about or whatever, and just focus on, what do you people have going on today? What do you think about this? And so
yeah, I agree. It's hard sometimes to be the person to lower the boom, and it's hard to be the person who says that was great, without getting so personally invested yourself. Trying to provide the right amount of support, but then they've got to be self-sufficient by the time they leave. And I've got students right now; they're making recordings for graduate school, and it's a big deal. They're going to get financial support, hopefully from an institution, and where they go, even though, of course, they're all going to make their own success wherever they go. But still, you want them to get into their first choice. And,
sure.
And so it can be hard to feel a lot of responsibility for, even though, technically if I've done my job, they're the ones taking everything they've learned and putting it together, but it still can be terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so when you think about your own growth over the past, what's it been, 15 years, what would you say has been a kind of a satisfying development of your own skills, either as a performer or as a teacher?
Well, as a teacher, I definitely, I'll let it, like right now we're getting ready for juries, which are next week. And this is the third.
Just to explain a little bit, what happens at juries?
The jury is the final exam for the class of applied clarinet. They have a 10-minute slot. They come in and play for a panel of faculty. And the grade they get was an average of all the faculty grades. It's about 5 people, is a third of their final grade for that course. So it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Mostly not from the grade, mostly because they just want to play well for us, you know. So as this past week, I've been hearing them all, and like the first thing we do in their lessons is, let me hear you play your jury piece all the way through, often with the pianist there. And I used to, as a young teacher, I would get, if something didn't go quite right, I would get completely freaked out, thinking like, oh my God, the jury's next week, and she still can't, you know. And now I'm like, okay, remember to mention that. I make my checklist in my head, and then I go back and I say, okay, well, at measure 10, you forgot to do that thing that we talked about. And then we go back and she does it, and I say something like, you know, I don't care if you make a bunch of note mistakes. I want that concept right there. And that can be really effective because I feel like I'm giving them freedom to like take a risk, but do not forget that thing right there. Yeah. And, you know, eventually they don't have to, eventually that stuff becomes a part of their playing and they do it without you having to mention it. But now, as a more experienced teacher, I just go back and fix it instead of, you know, I think me freaking out probably was visible to them to some degree, even though I tried not to be. And I feel like the calmer I am, and if things are really serious, I'll say, if that had been your jury, that would not pass. You know, and that's, a lot of kids are really motivated by grades, so that's, which is great. That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
Right? But sometimes it's just enough for me to say I'm disappointed to, you know, people cry all the time, and it's really stressful. So I think I just have a better handle on, like, don't worry, this is a lot of the stuff is fixable, even though it's next week.
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, that the performance aspect of the teaching that you do is, I have to say, it gives music students, I would say, such a richer sense of what we're doing here, because there's some personal pride involved in actually learning this stuff, as opposed to just jumping through a hoop. You know?
Or like learning about something.
Yeah. I mean, I just, as a recent anecdote, because, you know, I have been teaching this freshman writing class with music majors for a number of years now, and I recently have asked them to post these last papers that we've been working on to a public WordPress blog site, right? And I didn't have a grade attached to, like, and now we're going to put it on the blog, right? And so I was, you know, sort of, as I was reading these last papers, it became clear that some of them were really good, and I was really excited to have them have a more public forum, and some of them were not ready, you know?
Yeah.
And were not, I hated for the student to feel like they were publicly kind of embarrassing themselves by being required to put this in this public forum.
Right.
But what was interesting about it was that I did not really have to sell them on, and now we're going to put these on the blog, because they're music students and they understand that, like, not everything that you do is attached to a grade. There are some things that you do because it's part of sharing what you've learned and, you know, having this audience for what you're doing. And it's such a, I have to say, you know, a real benefit from my perspective to be in that kind of teaching situation where you feel like, well, you know, I can ask people to do things without attaching a number of points to them.
Right. Yeah, well, that's great. My students love your class, by the way.
Oh, that's good.
Love your class.
That's good.
We have that studio class once a week. And I use it as it's like a performance opportunity that's less stressful than convocation, which also happens once a week, which is for the entire student body. So it's like 250 people. This is just the other clarinet majors and me, which is still terrifying for them. It's their friends usually. It's people that they know played that piece last year or last month, and maybe they're afraid played it better. Yeah. But there's absolutely they have to come to studio class. That's the only, attendance is the only grade. So I don't let them play unless they're ready. So it's like, that was great. Do you want to play it in studio class on Friday? And it's like, they're like smiling and terrified at the same time, because they know that means, A, I really thought it was really good, and B, now they got to get up in front of all these people who really know the piece and really know, you know, good from bad. And but the performance itself is not graded, but everybody does their very, very, very best, the best that they possibly can every single time. So I guess it's kind of the same as what you're talking about.
I don't know how you can transfer that to other arenas, but there's something about, well, I think, maybe on Tower Day that happens a little bit.
Sure.
Nobody's getting a grade for presenting something on Tower
Right,
Day.
but the students are excited and they do
Yeah.
they do the best they can preparing for it.
Yeah. In this last segment of the show, Lisa and I discuss her experience of recruiting good students and selling them on CSU. Well, let me shift gears here just a little bit. We've talked a lot about your, experience at CSU and things in the past. What would be kind of a vision for you of what you'd like to see CSU like 10 years from now?
CSU or
yeah,
the school
or
of
you could
music,
be you could be more narrow if you want to than that. But
well, well, for me personally, and maybe for everybody at Schwab, but certainly for me, we're more well known now, like in the Atlanta metro area and in certain areas of the country, and internationally in certain cities at conservatories, because we've got a lot of international students. But we still don't have a lot of name recognition, just in general, even though I make a lot of personal contact with students and parents, and I have a lot of students who love it here, and they tell their parents, and their parents tell other families with school-age kids, and so it's a little easier than when I got here, but I still really sweat blood getting really good students to come here. It's hard when they've grown up with UGA, the football team and the Red Coat marching band in their brain if they've lived in Georgia for a long time. Or a lot of people think they need to go out of state to get a better education, and there are some great schools, including some of the ones I went to, which are great. So what I would like in 10 years is to have a line of kids who are desperate to come here, because selfishly that would be a lot less work for me.
Yeah.
But it would also mean something, I think, about our general academic reputation and the music reputation. So I guess for CSU, I'd like to see, and I know this is part of our strategic plan, I'd like to see better name recognition across the board, and not just who we are because we have a something, but who we are because we're a really good program.
Yeah. It seems to me like if you're good, those things tend to pick up steam. Yeah. And so if we focus on what we're doing and doing it well, I hope that will happen too.
I hope so. It's just going really slowly right now.
Yeah, I know. Well,
and we're more fortunate than most. I don't want to, we have a way, something to do. Like I could go out and play a concert, and it's a little, or like visit a band class and work with clarinet players. So I'm directly working with those kids. I know it doesn't work the same in every area.
Yeah. Well, I know I have a friend in Chicago whose daughter's in a youth orchestra, and the Schwab School was in the program, had an ad. So she noticed it, of course, because she's my friend.
Right,
but, I thought, wow, in Chicago, that's cool.
We do a good job of targeting specific areas, but for terms of the economy, we have a lot more tuition waivers than most people who have zero. I'm talking about out-of-state tuition waivers.
Yeah.
And I realize that that's very unusual and that we're really, really lucky. So we always try to get as many in-state students as we can for obvious reasons. And there are a lot of great kids in Georgia. There's talent everywhere. But it's hard then to convince those students sometimes. Either they look at our SAT cutoff and they think, well, if it's that low, I don't want to go there. But CSU's doing a lot of things right now to try to improve that. So my hope is that the harder I work, the harder everybody else works at the same time, and then it's better for all of us.
So when you are working with somebody who's a potential, a prospect, or even when you've got guest artists coming in, what do you have to? What's a best kept secret about our town or our university that you have to sell them on?
Well, it's really, the secret is that we're here, because once they drive to town, like once they pull up to the River Center, and I meet them, and I show them our performance halls, for example, there aren't many places that are more beautiful than Legacy Hall, and certainly not in a small university setting. So, I talk to them about how we have all these amazing donors and just unbelievable community support, and how that makes a lot of things possible that we wouldn't be able to do. So they have no idea. Most of them have never been to Columbus unless, the dad went through basic training here. And they don't really want to be in Columbus because of that. So I take them and I talk about support, and then I give the student a lesson, and I spend an hour saying, if you were my college student, this is what I'd ask for next, and so I want you to come back and have another lesson, and this is what I want to see. And I try to really challenge them during that time, because as a student, when I was a kid, I was really turned on by something being hard and somebody trusting me with something hard. Like, it made me really want to go home and work. So then I take them to the housing, and the housing's so beautiful that they, and none of us, the parents always say, forget you, kid, I'm going to stay here. And I say the same thing, and we do that every time. And then they have lunch somewhere downtown, and it's the same every time. It's this realization that not only is Columbus a real place, it's not just Fort Benning, but there's all this stuff, there's all this support, and there's this hip little downtown, which feels really hip, but it also feels really safe.
Yeah.
And Georgia State is one of our competitors, so they contrast it with being downtown Atlanta.
Sure.
There's a police station right there, which I'm always careful to point out. They see, and I also spend a lot of time with them, and I don't charge them to have a lesson. And sometimes I'll be with them 3 or 4 hours. They go to a class, they go to a rehearsal, they have a lesson with me, they see the housing. They meet some of my students. We strategically happen to run into them in the hallway.
Sure.
And they take them somewhere. I mean, it's the secret is that all that is here.
Yeah.
And once they see it, most of them really want to come. If I can get them down here to see all that.
Right.
Because who wouldn't? I mean, it's the students who are like, I should go to UGA. We don't have a marching band, which is really great. Marching band is a big waste of time for music students, even though it's so great as a supporter for an athletic department. Mm-hmm. But I was in marching band at Indiana because I was forced to be, and it's not really about music. And for a non-music major, it's really great. It's a great way to meet people, but our students have all this time to practice and study and play in all these really high quality ensembles. So, some high school students, it's hard for them to imagine life without marching band.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
So, that's
interesting.
Fine. Actually,
it's an interesting divide, really.
And I tell them, if it's really important to you, then this probably is not the right fit for you.
Right.
Period.
Right.
So,
which is fine. Then people sort of sort themselves out.
Right.
Well, and yet another incredibly, time-consuming thing for you to be hosting people from out of town all the time.
The return on investment is worth every second. Because a good student makes my quality of life so much higher.
Yeah, yeah.
Not just a student who sounds really good, but a student who's just, I have all of them because I kind of hand-pick them this way.
Yeah.
They're nice, they're responsible. I can call them up and say, look, can you go to this locker and can you get this thing and can you take it to this guy? And I never have to worry about stuff like that. So 4 hours on a Saturday, totally worth it. I'll never stop doing that.
Well, so, all right, I only have one more question for you.
Okay.
And given the way that you clearly love what you do, maybe this is going to be sort of superfluous question, but if you weren't Lisa Oberlander, head of a clarinet studio at the Schwab School of Music, what sort of an alternative fantasy career you might like?
Well, I really like technology, which I don't, there wasn't that much technology when I was in school. Their email was just starting.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I'm not that old, but, I'm really fortunate, actually, because I just happen to like sitting down on a computer and figuring out how something works. I can actually help a lot of my students. Like, we have a great technology area at Schwab, but we don't have the staff or the personnel to do videos for everything that happens, or a lot of graduate school auditions are now required to be video. They want to know for sure that it's the person that's applying that's actually playing, and you can't really splice in a video without it being noticeable. Like you can, there's so many ways to splice audio that are virtually undetectable. So they'll say it must be video, it must be all done in one take. And so I bought a, Canon digital video camera, and my students borrow it, and they'll use like a Zoom so they get good, or they'll use our really great audio equipment, and then they'll transfer the files to me, and I'll put them together and transfer them back, and they can, however they get it to the school.
Yeah.
But for people that don't just like that, and more and more, all the stuff you and I are required to do are in like web-based forms, or using programs, or like just using Banner, or using D2L, or all those things. They have similar sorts of, try this, try that. And if you're not somebody who naturally likes to do that, it could be, I can't imagine how frustrating the job must be.
Yeah. So a tech nerd of some sort might be a possibility.
And 10 years ago, I would never have said that, because I didn't, that stuff really didn't exist.
Yeah.
But the kinds of things that people hate to do, like sit down and look at a manual and figure out, I love that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I like dealing with online teaching stuff a lot more than I thought I would. It's really nerdy.
It totally
is. You're
is.
Like, ooh, look, I can make it sort of cooler if I put it in this file. And
Right. But it's really nice to have so much control. I can't, I imagine if you're somebody who just doesn't like it, or who doesn't have really any experience with it, that you just feel like the world was leaving you behind, and you'd have to ask other people for help all the time. And so I sometimes wonder, like, if I couldn't play another note, I would hope I could still teach. There's a famous clarinet player who went blind, so he couldn't play in the orchestra anymore because he couldn't see the conductor, but he could still teach, and his students said he was amazing. Like, he'd be like, no, do not put your pinky down on that high C sharp. I can hear that you have it down.
Yeah.
So
I bet his audio sense was amazing.
Oh, yeah. But I would hope, if I couldn't do this job, I would do something technology related.
Yeah, that's cool. You'll be ready for the virtual university.
I guess so. I think we're kind of on the way there right now.
Yeah.
Although nobody's teaching clarinet lessons online.
Yeah.
Although people are doing Skype lessons sometimes.
Are they?
It's not the same, but
no.
As technology gets better,
who knows?
I could be replaced by the principal clarinet from Chicago Symphony, because he could be anywhere at any time.
But then they wouldn't have you.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope that never happens.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Well, I think we've probably exhausted more than our allotted time, but thank you.
Great. Well,
very
thank you
much
for having me. This has been fun.
Well, good. Yeah, it's fun for me too. On the next episode of Inside the Professor's Study, I'll be talking with Dr. Gary Sprayberry, Chair of the Department of History and Geography. Look forward to seeing you then.